it's never putting the cart before the horse. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because what he's saying, trade.
This video is made possible by Curiosity Stream and Nebula. Watch another brand new full-length companion video to this one in my ongoing Modern Conflict series that explains the entire course of the ongoing conflict inside of China's Xinjiang province and the genocide of the Uyghur people who live there, along with 14 other
What's going on in the Xinjiang province? Yeah. I'm confused.
full-length episodes with more than 5 hours of combined content covering other major 21st century conflicts, all of which you can access by signing up for the Curiosity Stream Nebula.
Well, it's now like a tourist destination, as far as I understand. It's like
it's set up.
They already dealt with whoever they consider to be like a separatist. I'm sure there's still mass surveillance going on, but even like even the Associated Press was like, all right, genocide over, guys. Yeah. Pack it up. Yeah. They packed it up. The re-education camps are done.
Dangerous body of water anywhere in the world for the 21st century, and the most likely place where the Third World War could be triggered from. 7 different powers exist around this sea's perimeter: China, Taiwan, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. And they all bitterly disagree over their competing merits.
Brunei mentioned POG.
Regional power.
You got a shout out, guys.
Let's go.
Maritime claims here. Vietnam claims this much, the Philippines claims this much, Malaysia claims this much, while Brunei claims this much. All 4 of these nations' maritime claims in the South China Sea overlap the other 3 in at least 1 other location, and so they all have, to an extent, disagreements with all the others. But all 4 of them are significantly more united against the much more dramatic and sweeping maritime claims of the 5th power to enter into the equation here, the People's Republic of China, who claims for its...
They entered the equation later. Yeah, they came into the fold out of nowhere. It's crazy.
Nearly the entirety of the whole...
Wait, real life lore claims Scottish independence threatened NATO not that long ago? Oh my god, that's awesome.
At the tremendous expense of everybody else's claims around it, in what they call the 9-dash line. Through this claim, China asserts that around 90% of the entire South China Sea are the exclusive territorial waters of China, which not only brings it...
If one more motherfucker says there's an echo coming through the microphone, I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. Yes, dude, yes.
But if you turn the noise gate on and we just scream like
shut up, shut up, shut up, take a week off, shut the fuck up. Audio pedophiles, shut the fuck up. You're a freak, dude. Oh, I have an open back $700,000 studio headphone, and I'm hearing your ass cheeks clench in here, and it's actually really fucked up.
Surely you only buy those
headphones because
you want to hear someone's ass clench.
Oh my god, dude.
It into direct conflict with the overlapping claims of Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei, but with the United States as well. Beijing's claim to most of the sea as territorial waters means that they also believe they have the authority to approve or deny any foreign navy from operating within it whenever they feel like it. To which the United States, owner of the world's most powerful navy, fiercely disagrees. Washington considers the boundaries here to instead line up roughly with the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, the international law benchmark generally accepted by most other countries in the world that would ordinarily establish the maritime boundaries in the South China Sea to look more like this, with 12-mile territorial water stretching out from everybody's coastlines, and 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zones stretching beyond that through the open ocean that anyone's navy can sail through without any permission at any time. These different maps over the same area, one believed by Beijing, others believed by Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei, and another believed by Washington, are all directly at odds with each other and are shoving both of the superpowers into an increasingly dangerous conflict. In order to further enforce their claims, the Chinese have begun rapidly constructing entirely new islands within the sea, covered by naval and air bases bristling with
and
the
America
latest
just takes over other
firepower,
people's
while
islands.
the United States has continued their own naval and air patrols despite all of the Chinese warnings. And while on the surface, it
which
may
is good
appear that
and
China's
normal.
territorial claims here in this sea are overly
what's that stupid little one they
ambitious,
control?
ridiculous, or even
Guan?
reckless.
Guan, yeah.
Their claim is in fact rooted in
That
Beijing's own
stupid little
fear
one.
of the single greatest geopolitical weakness that plagues all of the strategic thinking of the modern Chinese state. A
Guy
weakness
sucks. He's
that
so
is
much-
so
he's
enormous
further
it
right
could
than
potentially
Johnny.
end up destroying the entire country if it ever becomes properly exploited. And yet so small that it only stretches 1.5 miles wide. It is essentially China's equivalent to the Death Star's exhaust port, and it is located right here. The Strait of Malacca, the strategic gate
Malacca.
between the Pacific and Indian
Where my
Oceans,
Greeks at?
between the Malay Peninsula in the north and the Indonesian island of Sumatra in the south. This natural choke point is geographically the shortest possible path for container and cargo vessels traveling by sea to take while traveling between Europe, the Middle East, and Africa on one side, and East Asia over on the
just
other.
laughing at the
As a
name
result,
Malacca.
around $3.5 trillion worth of global trade passes through these gates and across the sea lanes of the
furthest
South
east
China Sea every
Alexander the Great ever
single
made
year,
it.
including
The
an
Strait of Malacca.
overwhelming
He's like, "Fuck this, I'm going home, Malacca."
2/3 of China's entire maritime trade volume. 40% of nearby Japan.
Which is why it should belong to America. Okay. Asked and answered. Like, shut the fuck up, everybody. What do you mean? I don't get it. I see no problem here.
Yep.
And by America, I mean, like, not directly America, but indirectly through, like, a client state.
Japan's entire maritime trade, and nearly 1/3 of the total volume of all worldwide trade. But perhaps most critically for you to understand is that these
Also, you know, it goes back to the same, like, Aussie joke that we watched earlier, which is, like, we need to preserve these, we need to preserve these trade routes from Chinese influence so that the Chinese that are utilizing this trade route won't
To bring us all that stuff.
they won't somehow, I don't know, ruin the trade route that they have with us.
flows of trade usually also
funny to say
include
that
around
while actively
15
trying to destroy
million
that trade
barrels
route.
of oil a
As
day,
Americans
and around
and
1/3
Australians.
of all the world's traded liquefied natural gas, or LNG. China and Japan, the world's second and third largest global economies respectively, each rely on this single strait for a whopping 80% of all their imports of oil, primarily
hate
coming in
about
from
these
Iran and the Arab
science
states
history
around the
channels.
oil-rich
Like
Persian
infographic.
Gulf.
Yeah, because
Imports
everything's
that are
a fact, but
especially
obviously nothing's a
critical
fact.
for
You
China,
change
as
it and you
imported
pick what you
oil
want.
from abroad makes up.
What are you saying?
I said that everything's presented as a fact, but obviously you still pick the fact. And you say what you want, and then it's presented in this way that's like neutral, you know? It's like, no, everything, it's all political. Stop pretending it's not. Like,
No, this is neutral. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yep.
China wants to. It's really weird that China wants to encroach on any kind of trade routes that they maintain, and make sure that it's not controlled by America.
Up 75% of China's entire oil consumption, which ultimately means that roughly 60% of China's entire supply of oil passes through just these 1.5 miles. But China is heavily reliant on this choke point not only because of the energy resources they import through it, but because of the massive volumes of manufactured goods that they also export through it as well to Europe. Exports that largely prop up the very foundation of the modern Chinese economy. These realities lead to a rather obvious problem. If the Strait of Malacca, at only 1.5 miles wide at the narrowest point, were to somehow become obstructed or blocked for a significant amount of time, China's entire economy and society would essentially collapse if given a long enough time. This is because there simply aren't really any
Okay, but like, why is he talking like China is just doing trade with aliens or something?
Yeah.
Like those goods are going somewhere. Who are those goods going to, man?
Yeah.
Right, who's buying them? Like, you think it would just be the Chinese economy that collapses? What the fuck?
Yeah, it's so strange.
I don't really understand that.
Good enough geographic alternatives for China's energy imports and manufactured exports to travel through. Any other possible maritime trade routes getting to and from the Chinese East Coast would have to reroute around
I saw another gap there.
and either pass through any of the number of other easily blockadable choke points through the thousands of islands in the Indonesian archipelago, or pass along the long open ocean route around the southern side of Australia.
What is he describing now?
Why
He's
back
describing
in 2003,
holes in mountains
just
like
months
it's a
after
unique
the United
thing as
States
well.
invaded the very oil-rich nation of Iraq, the Chinese president of the time, Hu Jintao, warned of what he called China's Malacca dilemma, the risk of what he referred to as certain hostile foreign powers, like the United States, India, Australia, or others, could blockade Malacca and easily sever China.
Y'all trying to block Malacca or what?
We are.
Well, now you got nuclear submarines, dude.
Let's do it. You could stack 10 of them and block the fucking Strait of Malacca like that.
Yeah.
Just move it up and down. Like, what was that boat? Green,
Ever
whatever.
Given.
Ever Green, Ever Given. Let's do that. Maybe the Ever Given was a practice.
yeah,
for the
in the
Strait of
Suez
Malacca.
Canal.
Yeah. Now they're building a really big boat to block it.
Yeah.
Famously, when that happened, it only hurt the Egyptian economy.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone was like, "Oh, it sucks to be Egyptian right about now."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, where's my vibrator?
China's critical lifelines of energy and strangle Beijing, and thus China's domination over the South China Sea, pushing China's influence directly to the Strait of Malacca itself, became of imperative importance to Beijing's own national security. But fascinatingly, it didn't always used to be like this, because China's current crippling dependence on importing energy from abroad and relying so heavily on the Strait of Malacca is a fairly recent development historically. After all, China is actually, in fact, one of the world's largest producers of oil domestically. They are the 6th largest oil producer in the world today and roughly equivalent to Iraq, with many very large reserves scattered across their northwest, northeast, and immediately offshore. Back in the 1970s and 80s, China used these big reserves to not only be completely oil self-sufficient, but to actually even become an oil exporting nation, primarily to the Japanese, who have basically zero domestic oil reserves of their own and have always been a massive oil importer for their entire.
So funny.
He said it like the Japanese.
Yeah, sucks to be you.
But also, Japanese are part of the people who are supposedly meant to like hold up this blockade against their main oil exporter.
What a bunch of lamos. Sorry, did your island not have any oil reserves? Lamau. Oh, man.
Modern history as a result. But back at this time, the Chinese economy was absurdly tiny compared to what it is today, accounting for only 1.6% of the entire global economy as recently as just 1987. But beginning in the mid-1980s, China's economy began to experience the era of incredibly explosive and rapid growth. And with that growth came an ever-increasingly hungry economy for more and more energy to continue sustaining and growing it. And by 1993, China crossed a historic turning point that it would never cross back from right up until the present day.
Guy uses logos from
Domestic oil
Civilization
production,
6.
while large,
that what it was? Yeah.
not large
familiar.
enough to keep up with their economy's growing demand. And they had to start importing oil from abroad for the first time in modern history, as China's economy continued to keep seeing meteoric growth year after year, and the hunger for energy continued increasing alongside of it. China suddenly became the world's largest consumer of energy by 2009. the second largest importer of petroleum behind the United States in 2011, and then even surpassed the US to become the new #1 largest importer of petroleum by 2016, and then overtook Japan to become the world's largest importer of LNG just last year in 2021. Now, these days, despite having the world's 6th largest amount of oil reserves, domestic oil production only meets the demand for 20% of China's 1.4 billion person economy. And that means that China imports around 80% of all of its oil, the vast majority of its natural gas, and consumes about 25% of all the energy used by humanity. But unlike the countries who make up the West, China's mixture of energy use is rather different because the vast majority of China's energy consumption continues to be overwhelmingly based on coal. And for very logical reasons from China's own national security perspective, because comparatively to oil or gas, China actually possesses enormous amounts of coal, roughly 13% of all the coal in the world, in fact. Coal is therefore, in general, a reliable and stable source of energy that China can tap into directly without the need for relying on geopolitically complicated imports. And so,
like a year
coal
ago,
represents
2
around
years ago, they announced that they're
60%
not going to build any more coal-fired power plants.
China needs a Donald Trump figure to bring back good, clean coal, I think.
I love coal.
Kind of fucked us up because that was Australia's main export.
currently consumes. Oil ranks second at just 20%, natural gas in a distant third at just 6%, while alternatives like nuclear and renewables make up the remaining combined 14%. This essentially means that with 80% of oil imported and nearly all natural gas imported, China must rely on imports to meet more than 1/5 of their entire energy consumption. And most of all of that comes from just a single place, the Persian Gulf, the planet's largest concentration of hydrocarbon resources like oil and gas ever discovered. A quarter of the world's oil and 35% of the world's natural gas reserves exist around its shores, separated from the Chinese east coast not by one, but two major geopolitical choke points. The Strait of Hormuz that separates the Gulf from the Indian Ocean, and the Strait of Malacca that separates the Indian Ocean from the Pacific Ocean. 80% of China's imported hydrocarbon supplies come from here and pass through both of these choke points, either of which could theoretically be strangled by the American Navy during a time of war, which is an important factor for Chinese military strategists to
Once again, I don't know why he's like describing this as though nationalism is not a weapon that capitalists wield and that nationalism could overtake capitalist interests. That just can't happen. Fundamentally speaking, or at least historically speaking, fascism is used as a way to strike order at times when the capitalist organization of the economy has created tensions and volatility, instability. It's never putting the cart before the horse. The reason why I'm mentioning this is because what he's saying would be like America has so much nationalist interest that they fuck their own corporate interests up. Because it's not like China is sending these commodities through these points to, I don't know, some random fucking unrelated entity. They're sending it to Europe. They're sending it to America. This is manufacturing for Western corporations happening.
But could it be like just forward-thinking corporations that are like, we're going to get dwarfed by Chinese ones eventually? This is the way to stop it. Like a temporary L for, ensuring your position at the top.
I think it's a suicide pact at that point. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But
also, all this video has done is just told us trade routes in 13 minutes. Really.
Consider when contemplating Beijing's long-time ultimate foreign policy objective, the subjugation of Taiwan
We gotta finish
beneath
first.
Beijing's direct rule.
I bet you
The
know.
long-standing
this up.
policy coming from
He's
Beijing is that
talking and sprinkling
Taiwan
chippies
is
on his
not
food
an
as well,
independent country, but merely a rebellious province of China. Taiwan, of course, for all intents and purposes, truly is a de facto independent country in nearly every conceivable way except for name. And that's because Beijing has been incredibly explicit for years now that if Taiwan were to ever formally make a move towards an outright declaration of independence, separating itself from China, Beijing would unconditionally utilize military force and even go to war to prevent it from happening. Beijing knows that if the time ever comes when diplomacy has failed and they mobilize for war and an invasion of Taiwan across the Taiwan Strait, it would likely also mean going to war against Taiwan's greatest defender and supporter, the United States. In that event, the American Navy would be almost certain to at least attempt a blockade of the Malacca Strait in order to starve China's military and society out of their critical supplies of fuel. Militaries run on oil.
At no point have we asked, like, why does America have control over these trade routes?
Yeah.
What are they doing
Like-
in this strait? that,
Like, he's talking about, like, oh, man, China fucking doesn't want Taiwan to breathe. China doesn't want Taiwan to exist. Which, by the way, the American government, which controls all those trade routes, also has the same position as Beijing. But not once have we asked the question, like, what the fuck is America doing there? I don't understand that.
Like, imagine if it was the other way around and China just had stuff in
the Gulf of Mexico.
In the Gulf of Mexico. Just like, oh, we're just making,
making
sure
sure.
nothing happens here, guys.
Just keeping an eye on it for you.
Just keeping an eye off. You
Sorry
know,
about it.
just making sure our ship, our ships get in.
And under this scenario, with 80% of China's oil imports suddenly blockaded, the clock would begin to tick for Beijing. China controls one of the largest strategic reserves of petroleum on the planet. But even that has only enough when at full capacity to, based on estimates, last their entire normal consumption rate for only around 90 days. If they haven't achieved their objectives in Taiwan, and the Americans are still keeping up the block.
What do you reckon will take longer? Like 90 days of China without electricity or 90 days of America without all its treats from China? Like 90 days without Sheen. That's like 1,000 new designs.
I think America would probably collapse quicker. With
How lean our logistics are nowadays, 90 full days without Chinese trade would literally collapse the Western world.
Yeah.
Like, because it's not just like tasty treats and shit. There's plenty of components that like Western manufacturers need that they're getting from that area.
Every single electronic component.
Also from Taiwan as well.
Chips, microchips.
Which is now under Chinese rule, like fully. Okay? So what the fuck are you going to do in that situation? Yeah, our just-in-time manufacturing is going to kill us 100%. I mean, dude, look at what happened.
Did.
Look at what has happened time and time again. Like, whenever there's any kind of issue there, whenever there's any kind of bottleneck. Look at COVID. I mean, I think 90 days with no trade from China would be significantly worse for the Western world than vice versa. I mean, it would just be terrible in general, which is why it shouldn't happen.
Blockade of Malacca, after those 90 days or so are up, then the Chinese will begin being forced to dramatically ration their fuel supplies and massively divert civilian resources over to the war effort. This ultimately means that on day one of a blockade of Malacca situation, Beijing gets left with really only two options. Give in to the American demands for peace immediately and withdraw from their invasion in exchange for opening back up their supply lines, or dramatically expand the scope of the war and attack.
Like, it's so strange that he's not covering that component at all. Like, America's interest is having maintaining the relationship with China as a really important trade partner, it completely removes that from the equation. It's like, oh yeah, we'd be fucking going gung ho. Like how? What do you do in that situation? It makes no sense here. Just toss all that in the bag. Man, that was fucking good. The Aussie boys love Chipotle.
It's my favorite food in America.
It's probably the best. Is it considered fast food? Because if it is, it's the best. It's by far the best fast food.
No, incomparable.
It's
I mean, I've had some really shitty ones too, but we've had good luck with Chipotle so far.
It's great. Big servings as well.
Yeah.
Awesome servings.
The American Navy directly in an attempt to break the blockade. Or, even almost unthinkably, attack the American
Chick-fil-A's
Navy
great as well.
first before the invasion of Taiwan even begins, in order to deliver a crippling blow before they could enact the blockade. This 21st century situation rhymes eerily with that of the United States and Japan in the previous century. In August of 1940,
Yeah, we had a similar trade relationship with Japan, where Japan was famously manufacturing everything that we were using, and you know, they relied on us for purchasing all the goods that they were manufacturing for us. So that's why it's like pretty similar.
America, who at the time supplied some 80% of the oil to the Japanese Empire, slapped an embargo on their supply, leaving the Japanese with almost the exact same two choices that could be left to China this century. And against all the conventional wisdom of the time within the West, Japan ultimately chose the latter and seemingly more insane option by dramatically expanding the scope of the war and attacking.
Japan was 100% relying on American resources on oil. Yeah, but
America
again,
had nothing to lose.
I don't know why no one is seeing this. The real reason why America and China are not fucking warring and just saber rattling is not because we're just like too afraid of war or because Americans are like pacifists or something, okay? It's because of the one factor that he's not mentioning. It's trade. It's the metric ton of goods that fucking manufacturing and shipping a metric ton of goods every single fucking minute that's coming out of China and directly into European markets, directly into the United States of America. It doesn't make any sense. There's no similarity between any other nation. I don't even think there's ever been a similarity throughout history. This is a byproduct of globalization. It has never been like this before, where nation states had some, or actually a lot of autonomy from one another and could engage in like isolationist policies if they chose to do so. But ultimately, that reality is in the past. We do not have that anymore because we rely on Chinese manufacturing. I don't know why people just neglect that.
I think the mistakes can still happen. Like, the more you build up, something can go wrong. Like, even if it's against people's material interest.
Especially when it comes to tech shit. It's just, or in electronics, it's like damn near the entirety. The West has been stripped of manufacturing. It would take the entire West at least a decade of full-blown growth to get even close. Yeah. Anyway, not such a hot take, but no one started Chinese-American war for Taiwan because they both profit from Taiwan being one of the biggest chipset manufacturers. Wouldn't the reduction of exports reduce the resource demand too in this situation? I like the green guys, like anarcho-primitivists being like, well, that's technically good for the world. You know what I mean?
China and
yeah,
America.
we'd stop doing resource extraction in the third world. Motherfuckers will only understand if you say no iPhone. Yeah, no iPhone. America would become Vuvuzela no iPhone. Literally.
The American Navy in a preemptive strike at Pearl Harbor, and the result was a brutal 4-year-long total war across the Pacific that ended in 2 nuclear strikes. Today, it's a chilling thought to consider how a similar and logical series of events could end up playing out again.
It just ended.
And in the 21st century,
just
the
happened
United
at the
States is far from alone in their opposition to Beijing. There is also the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue, or the Quad for short.
He's about to mention every single country that we have either done, like, not dissimilar things that we've done to Japan, but, like, specifically similar things in forms of, like, in terms of maintaining whatever kind of governance they have. Like, every single other country that's unified in their fear against, Chinese hegemonic power are countries that we have manipulated into having, like, some kind of one-party governance.
Sort of security alliance between the United States, Japan, India, and Australia that Beijing derides as the Asian version of NATO. And then there is also the AUKUS, the Trilateral Security Pact between Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States for mutual defense policy in the Indo-Pacific that is helping Australia acquire crucially important nuclear-powered submarines.
Thank you.
Were China to attack Taiwan or the American Navy and enter into war with the
It's crucial.
You're like, Australia mentioned. Let's go.
United States, it would also most likely mean a greater conflict with the other Quad and AUKUS members of Japan, India, Australia, and the United Kingdom as well, who all share...
I love having the UK in that. Yeah. It's like, bro, you could not be further away.
You could be Greenland. What about
like,
Greenland?
Well, you could be America.
Yo, like, homie's on the team for some reason. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you guys doing up there? What's going on? You're part of this coalition?
Just thinking about China.
Yeah.
I wonder what they're doing in
It's
China.
just the dream team of racism all together.
England and its penal colonies that engaged in indigenous genocide. Or vassal states. Literally. Oh, man.
A mutual interest in containing Beijing and who all combined have a significantly more powerful and capable group of navies that could likely overwhelm China's in the Indo-Pacific and undermine all of China's objectives. Therefore, being well aware of this enormous problem now for decades, the Chinese have been taking tremendous steps to make sure that they can overcome it by any and all means necessary. The first and most obvious way has been to dramatically expand the power, budget, and capabilities of the Chinese Navy in order to more directly compete at sea with the fleets of the Quad and AUKUS allies. Within the past 20 years, the Chinese military budget has exploded by more than 6-fold. Using the latest comparative numbers, the Chinese military budget is now at around $240 billion a year.
That's
terrifying.
That's cheaper than our submarines.
Yeah, we bought
That's terrifying.
America.
I hate hearing that. It makes me so scared. Yeah. It makes me so scared. It's got to be. I mean, that's a lot of money. It's got to be the largest budget, right?
Yeah,
in the world, probably, right?
I'm sure that's more than $1 trillion.
Yeah, no, it's got to be like. Let's look at. I mean, I don't know. Let's fact check military budgets.
Do you know what it is off by heart? I haven't. I don't even guess.
Around 900
trillion?
No.
Billion.
Let's
I
look
think it
at
just
like.
passed over $1 trillion, but I don't know if that was just for 1 year or what that was.
Let's look at the military budgets, military expenditures globally. Oh, the United States in 2019 was we're 848 billion now. By the way, I can tell you, this was 700 billion in 2019. And then the rest of the world is 241 billion total.
We're 25.
China is at 261 billion.
But they always mention like 6-fold increase instead of just saying like now they're
a fourth or a third.
I think the 800 billion is only discretionary. I think with mandatory is 1.1 trillion. Yeah, it increases every year. It depends. It's defensive. It's totally defensive.
Those defensive nukes that Australia just
yeah, it's defensive. Of course, the reason why this is this size and the rest of the world is this size is because this also does it for the rest of the world. You know.
Well, it's like Australia's $270 billion thing. Like, we're buying them from America. So
Yeah,
it's
and we're using them in America.
for America.
Yeah.
Year. More than what the Soviet Union spent on their military at the height of the Cold War in the late 1980s, even when adjusted for inflation today, while the United States spends more than 3 times them at around $850 billion a year, or around 70% of what they were spending back during the Cold War when adjusted for inflation. Worldwide,
he's comparing
China
it
and the
to?
United States alone represent roughly half of all global military spending, and China is continuously narrowing this gap. By the end of this year, the Chinese
that.
Navy is expected to possess 4
US
aircraft
and
carriers,
Brunei
and they
make
plan
up
to
for
have
a third
5
of
by
the-
next
of
year,
world
compared to
military
America's
expenditure.
20. This naval arms race between the reigning great power, the United States, and the rising one, China, contains another eerily haunting historical rhyme.
Like, you can only, the only analysis here is basically if you're looking at it and you're like, China bad, and that's my perspective. Because, like, he just glances over America's insane military budget, and that's not scary. That's good because it's for defending democracy at the global stage. Okay, but then he's like, well, the Chinese military spending has grown, which is terrifying. Like, okay.
The naval arms race of the early 20th century for battleships between the reigning great power, Britain, and the rising one, Germany. Germany's economy finally overtook Britain's in
China deadly to Muslims. Yeah, dude. Famously, the United States of America certainly is not significantly more deadly to each and every Muslim nation on the planet. Yeah. Like, literally, that's an insane thing to say. Like, I'm not even going to sit here and act like, you know, there isn't mass surveillance and there wasn't any kind of like, cultural genocide, if you want to call it that, or some kind of like re-education of Muslim Uyghurs in Xinjiang. There certainly was. It's done now, according to the Associated Press. But the notion that the United States of America, actually, you know what? There's a really funny quote. I forget where I read it, and I always try to find it, but I have a hard time. Hold on. U.S. surveillance measures. I remember, and I can never fucking find it, but I remember when asked about the state of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang, Xi Jinping straight up fucking said, well, we knew that this was a big threat to our national security because we saw it from the United States of America, which, by the way, is probably one of his worst takes, I'll admit. You know what I mean?
But maybe he was just trying to get America on his side there. And it was like,
Yeah,
look,
come on, we're
guys,
doing
it's
it
the
together.
same reason that you were doing it. You know, well, you said that's what we're saying.
They're
Yeah.
trying to appease Americans. Be like,
Yeah.
look, we hate Muslims too.
Terrorism, eh?
Am I right? It's kind of hurting us all.
Yeah, India literally having weekly lynchings of Muslims, and we invited Modi to the fucking White House. Also true. Forgot about that one for a second. Anyway, so the idea that like China's policy in Xinjiang is reactionary and wrong. Meanwhile, we're funding straight genocide in Gaza, which is one of the many. Like, the United States has an involvement in a negative way in every single Muslim populated nation on the planet. Okay? Like, that's just one. Gaza is only one component. It's just unimaginable. The cruelty is unimaginable. It's like looking at like a tickle party in comparison to like mass enslavement and incarceration of people, and then hyper focusing on the fucking little slap that like a 5-year-old gave you or something, instead of the dude enslaving your family. Like, it's ridiculous. Anyway, move to China then, bro. Sure, the mansion will be cheaper than LA. First of all, you're not wrong. Secondly, I just don't speak any fucking Mandarin. And lastly, the only component that stops me from moving to a country like China, for example, is the fact that they do not have the same free speech, lack of limitations on free speech that the United States of America has, that I enjoy, that I very openly admit, for the record. So, you know. And also porn is banned, which is kind of fucked up.
In 1910, after decades of continuously rising and catching up, and then 4 years later, saw the outbreak of the First World War between them. At the same time,
why don't you move to X country? Doesn't really hit the same for China. It's like saying, like, why don't you move to France, dude? Like, why don't you move to fucking, why don't you move to Italy, dog? If you fucking hate America so much, it's like, oh, okay, well.
It'll be a bit different. I got to learn the language first.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some issues there, but like ultimately, you're making it seem like we're moving to, I don't know, the fucking tropical jungle or something, like with no working water.
Yeah.
Like it's not.
It's also just annoying though, because it's saying like, what, you're not allowed to criticize another country or your own country.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with doing that? Yeah. You only have to move to a country and then just shut up.
Yeah.
Then once you're there, you're like, nope, I'm gonna stop talking.
the Chinese possess
Which, by the way, ironically, you can't really criticize that country when you're there.
the advantage of geographic proximity to the most major theaters of any future potential conflict. America's most significant Indo-Pacific bases are far away from Malacca and the South China Sea, at Diego Garcia, Guam, Okinawa, Pearl Harbor, and the United States West Coast. Whereas,
bro, streamers are actually way more mainstream in China than over here. Yeah, also the 6 top streamers literally got arrested, well, they went away. We don't know if they got arrested or not, with only one coming back to stream, like, literally last month. So, you know, it was, I think, tax related.
Went away.
But you know, stuff like that happens all the time, and I'm not too fond of that. So,
no.
You know, they just stopped streaming. I think it was tax fraud related. Yes, I know. But even then, it's like,
yeah.
That's one of the nice things about America, though. It's easier to get away with tax fraud, and that's why we come here all the time.
Yeah, 100%.
China has been investing aggressively into numerous naval and air bases built out of nothing across the tiny coral atolls of the South China Sea itself,
They're trying to
giving their
impress the
ships
Americans.
and planes proximity to both the Malacca and Taiwan Straits.
We're getting up to a bit of mischief.
This is why China seems so aggressive in enforcing their ambitious territorial claims to the South China Sea by building up all of these island bases
I think it's in the Pacific.
to safeguard their access to the Malacca Strait and to ensure that their own critical import and export sea lanes remain open even during a major international crisis. If that means inflaming relations,
I like that he literally said it would remain open in major international crisis. So the first 20 minutes of this video is insignificant.
With Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Brunei, then so be it. From Beijing's perspective, it's a calculated price that they're willing to pay for the greater security of the state. But perhaps the biggest way that Beijing is attempting to overcome their Malacca dilemma is not through increased naval power, but through increased methods of getting their energy into the country from abroad. For thousands of years now, goods have traveled across the Eurasian continent between China and the West through vast expanses of mountains, deserts, and steppes across what is known as the Silk Road. It was through this ancient trade route that Chinese inventions like paper and gunpowder made their way westwards. And now in the modern 21st century, the Chinese are attempting to revive this same idea of the ancient Silk Road of the past.
I hate that. That makes me very scared.
Silk Road?
Yeah, and very angry. I hate that, yeah. Again, you know, just like at Nord Stream, I hate it when there's any kind of initiatives to like improve trade with a foreign adversary. I immediately start thinking like, well, I don't like that. You know, nobody asks America about that. Just really fucked up.
for Beijing's energy, transportation, and export needs in the present. And they
No, you can't say that. Nope. See, this is what I don't take. This no, fuck that. You can't say that, especially if you're American. Get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here, dude. Look at the last 20 years of Chinese prosperity and then compare it to the United States of America. How dare you? How dare you say China is not so good to its citizens? Like, yeah, there aren't the same level of like social libertarianism that you get in the United States of America. Yeah. You can't fucking watch porn. You can't say whatever the fuck you want about the government or whatever very publicly and openly. But the idea that like China is not so good to its citizens when they have engaged in a tremendous amount of like even development where you can look at like rural areas modernizing. You can look at all the tier 1 cities that they fucking built and then sit there in the United States of America where your fucking infrastructure is rotting to the fucking core that is still resting on the laurels of like prior social democratic formations in the American government, like the fucking FDR era development of infrastructure that you just fucking sit there and act like, oh man, China's not so good to its citizens. No, fuck that. I'm not taking that. Okay. That's bullshit. That actually is fucking bullshit. You know what that is? That's copium. Okay. You and I are stuck here sitting around constantly fucking going, oh, well, you know, our situation is dire elsewhere. Like, let's not make any, let's not take the initiative. Let's not make any amends. Let's not engage in any kind of like serious infrastructure spending. Get the fuck out of here. China isn't good just because America isn't good either. Like, you know better than this. Oh. No, I never said that like, oh, China is the best place or the best country or anything like that. But if you're going to fucking
That's
sit
not what
there.
Hasan said.
Yeah, he says that. But it's not like, but you can't fucking sit there and act like Chinese development has been bad for Chinese citizens. That's stupid. And you especially can't say that in the United States of America. Come on now. It's just, it seems like we are all collectively angry because we just feel like our time in the spotlight is coming to an end. And everybody kind of understands that a little bit, where they're just like trying to cope with that reality. They're trying to cope with that reality by being like, well, you know, at the top of the hour, there is a 3-minute ad break, but I'm just going to fucking close my eyes. Like, you can't do that. You can't close your eyes. It's going to come for you unless you subscribe for $5 or free with a Twitch Prime. Okay.
I think that was my favorite.
Yeah,
that was my favorite.
This is such a dumb argument. I know people who have lived in China, they do not describe an authoritarian hellscape that everyone tries to make it seem like. I've said this before, and this is from my interactions with Chinese people that live in China, that, or at least they think that this is a very accurate way to describe it. As long as you keep your head down and, you know, do your work and go to work, live your life, you know, you have all the amenities, the Chinese population, and it's not a monolith, obviously, has an overarching understanding that the government is taking care of them. And why wouldn't they feel that way when they've seen an insane amount of development over the course of their fucking lives? Not even just their grandparents' lives or not even just their parents' lives. They have literally seen it with their own 2 fucking eyes. Okay, so the idea is basically that as long as you don't fucking speak out against the government or say some fucking ridiculous shit that normally you could easily get away with saying in the United States of America, which is why I like living here rather than anywhere else, that you're fine. You have this understanding, this sense of like Chinese prosperity, the idea that like you know, the Chinese government is taking care of you, and they believe in it. They legitimately believe in it. That they're doing their best. As long as you don't speak out against the government, which is, I think, a severe erosion of civil liberties, I do agree that it's fine. Like things are good. You could make the same arguments about Americans. A lot of them say America's number one and they love it, but that doesn't make it true. Wait, what? No, I can't say the same arguments about America. You want to know why? Because America isn't actually engaging in any kind of American prosperity. Yeah. The only kind of American prosperity is like, oh, well, look at the GDP, or look at how many billionaires we have. Look at literally entirely wholesale fake industries like Silicon Valley. Look at how incredible they've been. Every single disruptive technological advancement made by Silicon Valley has just been, let's make it an app so we can avoid labor restrictions that were already set in place. Okay, whether it be Uber or Uber Eats or any other kind of thing, it's quite literally just new surveillance technology or just another way to disrupt pre-existing labor regulations. Okay, and that entire economy is propped up by quantitative easing. So it's not like that economy is real either. Look at all the money being churned out of Silicon Valley. Is really funny saying it now. When we are no longer engaging in quantitative easing, when the interest rates are increasing, and that has single-handedly disrupted, or rather destroyed, a gigantic part of our industry. Okay? So don't tell me that the situation is the same here. You can make the same arguments. Just look at one fucking map. Look at one fucking map of high-speed rail in China from 2000 to 2023. And then look at that same map in the United States of America. It's a much easier map to draw because there is none. Okay? Come on.
You should go to China. It's pretty fucking crazy to see.
Yeah.
I want to, but I think I have criticized the China a little bit too much, ironically. Even though if you ask my fucking chat, I'm like the number one dick rider of China. There's a ton of corruption in their own government. No Hasan to speak up against that. Meanwhile, if you're that kind of corrupt outside the government, you get mob hit. No, there's certainly corruption in the Chinese government, just like there's corruption in any other government. Except, hey, you know what? When that corruption goes beyond party interests or goes beyond the interests of like the citizenry, you know what happens? They get executed. How many fucking American politicians have been executed for lobbying? 0. How many American corporations have been executed for poisoning the water supply or poisoning the people directly? 0. Get the fuck out of here. Anyway, you're a U.S. citizen with a U.S. passport. Literally nothing will happen if you go to China.
I mean, they are a lot harder on locals than they are on foreigners.
Yeah, like, that's the case with every country, but
we got caught doing like journalism, even though we came in on tourism visas.
Yeah,
nothing happened. Like,
like the police were
told to leave.
Yeah, but you guys are basically Chinese. You're Australian.
yeah, exactly.
So they probably looked at you guys and they were like, "Oh, these guys are just our 51st state." Oh, they're from the Australia
province.
Yeah.
I thought though that China seemed, in terms of what people can do, in some ways more freer than Australia in terms of obviously what you say no, but in terms of what you're allowed to do personally, like fireworks and all that fun stuff, driving rules, I was like way less stricter than Australia, which is crazy.
In America, you mean, or in China?
No, China.
Well, yeah.
That's because Australia's a prison colony.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We call it the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, with a total potential investment of around $1.4 trillion. An amount of investment that is more than 7 times larger, even when adjusted for inflation, than America's investment into Europe through the Marshall Plan at the end of the
Trains get built fast equals good to its citizens, though. Yes, dude. Public transit is unironically one of the fundamental planks.
That is one of the most absurd things we experience coming to America from
this
Australia.
This guy literally just said, what? Infrastructure development? Good to his citizens? What's next? What's next? Are you going to say healthcare equals good to his citizens? What's next?
They're American.
Are you going to say education initiatives good to his citizens? That's not what the government's there to do. The government's there to take your tax dollars and directly fund brown baby murder overseas, idiot. The fuck's wrong with you, dumbass? Yeah, no, trains get built fast is good to its citizens. That's like a direct thing that the government's supposed to do.
I like the suggestion with trains get built fast that America's just a little bit slower. Not like never going to build it.
Yeah.
It's like, we'll do high-speed rail eventually. They're just a bit faster than us.
We're doing slow-speed rail over here. But also, you don't realize how good public transport is until you have it.
Oh.
If you live in a country that doesn't have it, you're like, well, what are they building those trains for? And then as soon as the city runs properly and you can move around, it affects everything so much.
Yeah.
Makes it beautiful.
Yeah.
And it makes it accessible for people who don't have money as well. Like, you can't get anywhere in this city unless you can fucking afford Uber or have a car.
Fuck everything up.
You're so wrong about Chinese prosperity. The whole country has only one belt and one road, brother. Fuck you mean? Yeah, I mean, exactly. 2008 to 2020 is like just all of the fucking high-speed rail that has been built. Like
high-speed rail is terrifying, though. When we were on it, it was
It's
like
awesome.
you're on a plane, but like the ground's like right there. It's horrible.
yeah, it's sick.
I thought it was awesome.
No, it was very cool.
But then you imagine it crashing, you're like, this is the same as a plane.
yeah.
Remember,
It would just go
remember when? I mean, maybe you guys are not super up to date with like anti-Chinese propaganda in the United States, but like they used to literally point to this and say that's actually bad. Like they're building the train routes so that they can like they were talking about how like they built a train route, high speed rail to Xinjiang, and they were like, well, they're doing it to do genocide in Xinjiang.
Well, it's like the rails for the death camps in Europe.
Yeah, connecting the country with like high speed rail is actually a bad thing because they're gonna do bad things with that.
It reminds me, I was watching some like anti-Cuba thing, and they were talking about how they raised the literacy rate.
Yeah.
And like, well, they only did that so people could read the propaganda and become brainwashed.
Yeah.
Like, they're actually free when they were dumb. Like, I can't say the C word. You know.
Dumb cunts.
Yeah.
You can say the C word. You're Australian. You're
Yeah.
allowed. That's why I'm allowed because I'm Australian. There's a quote which says that the country with the most legislation in the world is the biggest failure. If you need a piece of paper to keep your citizens safe, happy, etc., you have failed somewhere along the way. Who wrote that? Fucking Milton Friedman? Who wrote that line? Yeah. Famously, regulation is really bad. I hate that. 500 protests a day in 2012 in China. Freedom of speech in China.
Wait, but if you're allowed to protest, surely that's is that not the thing?
How China stays stable despite 500 protests every day. Dude, an informal practice of within-system dissent has allowed the Communist Party to maintain stability even with thousands of riots and demonstrations. But what happens if the economy falters? This is yet another China is going to fall apart, I promise you, article written by, of course, none other than The Atlantic. And yet, for some reason, it still has not fallen apart since 2012. It's odd. I think what is great about your stream, even though I don't agree with everything you say about China, is you want to see a world free of xenophobia and where there's goodwill between peoples of the world. You are willing to listen and think critically. That's why you're good at what you do. Oh, thanks. Any day now, though. Any day. There's going to be fucking mass riots and protests in China that will destroy China completely. It's going to happen. My favorite YouTubers and Redditors keep telling me that.
Second World War. By constructing pipelines that transport energy from other countries into China and railroads and highways that transport manufactured exports out from China to other countries, all traveling over land, Beijing can strategically work towards
Dumb guy here. How is this any different from saying, as long as you fall in line and don't speak out against the government, life in Nazi Germany was actually pretty good. I mean, the trains were always on time. I don't know. Maybe like the entire reason why Nazi Germany was bad is completely irrelevant to China. You get what do you mean? What the fuck?
Yeah, but they rode bicycles. In Germany,
Yeah.
and they ride bicycles in China.
True.
Like,
come on.
This is very different. Where is the Holocaust, for one? That's a good way to start. Like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys know about that, but that happened. Ay, ay, ay.
overcoming their dependency on the Malacca Strait and the risk posed to it by the American Navy. Central Asia, immediately to the west of China, is an area of critical importance to the Chinese today because they have some of the most enormous reserves of natural gas and oil ever discovered around the basin of the Caspian Sea. The first ever oil pipeline over land that flowed into China was built here only in 2009. From Kazakhstan's oil-rich shore on the Caspian, running through China's westernmost Xinjiang province, it is capable of supplying 10 million tons of oil a year to China now. And it was only the first. In the very same year, a natural gas pipeline was constructed beginning in the massive gas fields of Turkmenistan. the sixth largest in the world and nearly double all of the gas reserves of China, and leading directly to China through Xinjiang as well. Today, this pipeline enables gas from Turkmenistan to be shipped 7,000 kilometers away over land to power homes and factories in Shanghai.
I mean, China has concentration work camps for the Uyghurs. Yeah, I know. That's first of all, they did. They don't anymore. That doesn't make it justifiable in any capacity. But a comparison to the Holocaust would be, you know, a little ridiculous. I think even the Holocaust Memorial Museum would not agree with that comparison. You can, like, even when I talk about American concentration camps, American labor camps, we have immigrant detention facilities that do literally that. We have Guantanamo Bay that is, like, specifically a torture prison, right? Specifically a torture prison that is on rented land in Cuba so that it's not, like, it doesn't have to abide by American legal standards, which are already pretty fucking bad. Okay? But your anti-China, your anti-China fervor gets you in, like, Holocaust revisionism territory. How do you actually know they don't have them anymore? I mean, I don't know anything about what happens in China. I can only rely on information from Western outlets. So when I say they're no longer in operation, I'm operating off of what the Associated Press has written. And the Associated Press has no interest in, like, sanitizing what China does, as the Associated Press is a Western institution, is a Western media outlet, an American media outlet, so it has every interest in further vilifying our foreign adversaries like China. So when they tell me that these re-education camps are no longer in operation, I have no choice but to agree. You know what I mean?
It's more comparable to Indian boarding schools than the Holocaust.
Yeah, I mean, that's still not great. You know what I mean? Like, that's still awful.
Yeah,
it's re-education.
Yeah.
It is more akin to a cultural genocide where they've basically turned in. They took Uyghur separatists that some of which were radicalized in Afghanistan, and utilized that as a cudgel, or utilized that as a reason to basically pacify or Hanify the entirety of this fucking region with incredibly draconian, incredibly brutal methods, including re-education camps, which are completely, wholeheartedly unacceptable. Okay? I'm not minimizing that. But I also am aware of the reality of the U.S. carceral state. You know what I mean? It's fucking ridiculous to make these... It's ridiculous to think that America looks better in comparison.
Yeah.
Is what I mean. You know what I mean?
It was like when we were in Mongolia, there was the thing where I realized, I was like, this used to be Mongolia, and China came in, and a lot of the Mongolians we spoke to didn't like China.
Yeah, we're living with a
with a bunch of Mongolians, and they had, like, all the Genghis Khan stuff, but it was all just, like, tourist attractions now. But then I was like, well, at least there's still Mongolians here, like in Australia, when that happens. You just killed every single indigenous person and kicked him out. And I was like, it's still fucked up, obviously, but it's not, it's still not as bad.
It's a light version of what we get up to.
Anyway, U.S. is a bigger prison population than China, which is heavily racially biased, and forced labor and literal torture, solitary confinement is very common. The cultural genocide in China is closer to ethnic genocide of African Americans in the U.S. It's just milder and short-lived. No, I mean, I think it's more. It's close. It closely resembles Native American, like indigenous populations, and what America did and what Canada did after they were done genociding. And it's a weird conversation to have when you're like, oh, well, this genocide is worse than this one or whatever. It's like such a stupid fucking conversation to have, because I think we all agree that it is still not good. It's unacceptable. It's bad. It's inhumane. I have never, that's part of the reason why I do worry that I wouldn't be able to get a visa to go to China, because of what I have said about the situation, right? So I find it to be a rather stupid conversation, but I won't sit here and act like this is identical to the Holocaust, or that it's worse than the Holocaust, or whatever the fuck people say on Reddit. Okay.
Entire half of all the gas that Turkmenistan exports abroad now flows through this single pipeline towards China. But these
Turkmenistan
energy
is sending
projects in
fires
Central
into
Asia
China.
have become slightly problematic
lighting-
with Russia.
They're
the
lighting
nation who
China
has
on
long
fire.
considered Central Asia to
Close
be
I'm
gonna go-
their
I'm gonna go grab
own
my,
sphere of
bag and
influence.
stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Start getting
More
ready.
and more of
You guys
Central
man the
Asia's
ship.
abundant reserves of energy are flowing
South
through
Stream now.
Chinese majority-owned pipelines.
What if violent radicals in that region pose a similar threat to white supremacist gangs in the U.S.? What would you soften your criticism then? I would never be on board with mass surveillance and re-education for all white Americans, just because there are white supremacist gang activity that is like truly threatening secession from the rest of the United States of America. So no, I don't think that there is an apt comparison there. It's just like ridiculous. Do you understand it now? I hope that helps you understand it a little bit better, because violent radicals in the United States of America do threaten, right, the integrity of the nation state. When is your flight leave? Let me give you the exact coordinates.
You had other people asking, "Oh, where are we going?"
Yeah, it's just like we're all going together.
They're all getting in your backpack and
Yeah.
going.
Well, they are technically, because I will be streaming when I'm out there, but it'll be IRL streams.
You got to join the riots when you're out there,
Yeah.
and then
Maybe
you
a
just
fun
blame it on chat. Be like, they told me to do it.
Towards China, and less is flowing through Russian-owned pipelines towards Moscow's traditional market in Europe. But Russia is having to accept the increasing Chinese influence in Central Asia, because China is also rapidly becoming the new largest market for Russia's own massive supplies of energy as well. Russia, with by far the largest reserves of natural gas in the world, and the second largest producer of oil in the world, is one of the world's energy superpowers, and is located directly next door to China, the world's largest consumer of basically all forms of energy. A relationship between Moscow selling energy and Beijing buying it was almost always going to be inevitable, simply based on both nations' geography and geology. And sure enough, it's been really starting to kick off. Just 3 years ago in 2019, the Russians completed their first natural gas pipeline into China, the power of Siberia.
What should we watch? Chat,
Yeah, tell us what to watch.
Please. I'm sick of these lines.
We could do current affairs. Do you guys want
That's
to watch
pretty
current affairs?
fun.
It's pretty fucking funny.
Oh, what do we got?
That's cat videos, gay sex.
Cat videos.
Gay sex is
I'd rather watch
good.
cat videos.
Chinese movie. I think Hasan wants to watch the
Yeah,
the
I don't wanna
Chinese movie.
steal
We
the
couldn't
Chinese
do that
movie
to
from
him. Self-sufficient me. Oh, yeah, I've seen Self-Sufficient me. He's not really
What is that?
political in any way. He's the guy that like look at this tomato plant that I can grow by putting a fish head in my garden bed. Does that sound interesting to anyone?
Oh.
Punk on Earth is funny.
Wait, is that what they
But-
said?
Yeah, but we can't watch that, I reckon. Well, I don't know how,
Yeah, it's like Netflix
how Gangnam Style.
music video.
Alexa does love
But
that. Why does it only have 6 million views?
It's Miranda Sings. It's doing fake Korean.
Okay, it's not her doing blackface.
That's the other one.
Porn reacts.
Porn reacts.
Give
That'll
us
be so much fun if only. Oh,
the password game.
or we're typing our password.
I don't know
Interrupt
who you
video
are.
back.
We don't know Hasan's passwords. Don't
90s Marxist rap.
see. They know how to get you.